Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is John Viglotti. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for the Battery and Precious Metals Conference. Kicking off day 2 of the conference is a live presentation from Lundin Gold. And before I introduce our speaker, a few points to note. Please submit your questions in the question box to the left of the slides. And if you're interested in scheduling a meeting with Lundin Gold, please click on the Meetings tab found on the left navigation bar. You'll be able to view the company's availability and submit a meeting request. On a final note, all of today's presentations will be recorded and available for 24/7 replay. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Ron Hochstein. He is the President, Chief Executive Officer, and the Director of Lundin Gold, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol LUGDF and on the TSX under the symbol LUG. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks, John, and thank you everyone for taking the time today to learn a little bit more about Lundin Gold. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so when you do have a chance, appreciate if you could take a look at our cautionary note here in the presentation, but also available on our website. Just to recap at a high level, Lundin Gold primary asset is the Fruita del Norte project, or mine now, located in southeast Ecuador in the provinces of Mars and Chinchipe. We are the first large-scale Western mine for Ecuador. It's an underground operation. Lundin Gold owns 100% of this operation, and we reached commercial production in February 2020 to February 2020. Unfortunately, had to shut down 1 month after that due to COVID, but have been operating ever since, starting up again in July 1st of 2020 and operating since then. Our current life of mine is approximately 13 years, and our resources at just under 5 million ounces at an average grade of 8.7 grams per ton. That average grade is pretty unique, as can be seen on this slide here. The x-axis is annual gold production. The y-axis is average grade of the reserves, and these are only producers with reserves greater than 4 million ounces. You can see that Fruita del Norte is pretty unique in terms of grade and throughput in the overall gold industry. As a result, it's a phenomenal asset, and we continue to use this asset to generate significant cash flow for our investors. Our board has been in place for quite a while. We have representatives from Newcrest, 2 representatives, and the Lundin family is represented by our chairman, Jack Lundin. The management team has been in place almost from the start of this company when we acquired this asset in 2014 from Kinross. Our new addition, Andre Oliveira, our VP of Exploration, has really revitalized our exploration programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're covered by many analysts, most in North America, one in Sweden, a spare bank analyst. You can see here our target performance, $14 to $15 per share range. Our shareholders, we have 2 large strategic shareholders. Newcrest, the large Australian gold mining company, owns 32%, and the Lundin family holds 27%, combined 59%. And a good broad base in both institutional and retail. Our current market cap is just over 3.1 billion Canadian. Every Lundin Group company, if you've invested in these Lundin Group companies prior, we focus on creating shareholder value. We are focused every day on creating value for our shareholders, such as you. How we do this? Operational excellence is one of our key pillars. As I mentioned earlier, Fruita del Norte is a unique deposit, one of the highest grade gold mines in operation in the world today. That doesn't mean that we can rest on our laurels and rest on that high grade. We continue to push expansion. Fruita del Norte, when we built it in 2019 and 20, was originally at 3,500 ton per day. We did an expansion in 2021. And took us to 4,200 ton per day. And now for 2023, we're looking at pushing that throughput another 5% to 4,400 ton per day. We also have many studies underway to look at even further expansion. With that, we're creating significant cash flow. How we use that cash flow is important to create value for our shareholders. We started paying our initial first dividend, returning capital to shareholders in September earlier this year, and we'll be moving to quarterly dividends in 2023. In addition to that, with that significant cash flow, we're pursuing organic growth through exploration, and I'll talk about each of our programs here shortly, and M&A opportunities. The key to this will be a new resource reserve update in Q1 of next year. All these pillars cannot be done without a strong foundation on environmental, social, and governance strategy. That has been key to our success in Ecuador. As I mentioned earlier, Fruita del Norte is the first Western mine in Ecuador. Ecuador's experience with mining was primarily small scale and artisanal. Now, large scale mine, we've shown what we said we would do, creating significant local opportunities, economic development in both the communities and at the national level. We have some numbers a little later to show how much Fruita del Norte has already contributed to the Ecuadorian economy. That said, it's so important to maintain good relationships with all of our stakeholders. This past quarter, we produced just over 121,600 ounces to bring our year-to-date to 355,190 ounces. You can see here our grades actually have been higher than our reserve grade. That is just dependent upon where we're at within the ore body. And you can see our throughput levels continuing to get close to that 4,200 ton per day. Q3 was a little lower. We did some significant mill lining changes in Q3 to our two mills, the SAG mill and the ball mill. And as a result, our throughput was a little bit lower in that quarter, but will be made up in Q4. We're well on our way to reaching the high end or surpassing the high end of our guidance in production and the low end of our cost guidance. We actually were one of the few companies in the precious metal space to increase our production guidance and decrease our cost guidance. Many in the industry indicated towards the higher end of their cost or actually had to increase their cost guidance. We went the other way. It was due to an increased production, as I mentioned, but also being in Ecuador. We're not seeing the inflation in Ecuador like many other jurisdictions. The other key aspect is energy. Our power, we're connected to the grid, is 85% hydro. And as a result, we're not seeing the significant inflationary impacts in energy like many other jurisdictions are seeing. We just recently, just a week ago, issued our new 3-year guidance, which shows increased production from our previous levels that we've indicated for 2023 and 24, and even higher levels for 2025. As you can see here, we're in that 450 to 500,000 ounce per year production. This puts Fruita del Norte as the second largest gold production in South America, and one of the top mines in terms of production in the world today. You can see our costs here as well, in that 870 to 940 for next year, and decreasing, moving slightly with changes in sustaining capital, but overall staying flat to if not decreasing over the next 3 years. Our all-in sustaining cost for the first 9 months of this year put us at $785 per ounce. This puts us in the lower 20% of the overall industry. And you can see generating significant margins at current gold prices of $1,770 to $1,800 per ounce. Many of the operations that are below us on this cost curve have copper byproduct credits or other byproduct credits, which helps to reduce their costs. We are one of the lowest pure gold operations in the world today. With those costs and at the production levels that we are at, we're generating significant free cash flow. We started the year just over $260 million in the bank, in the till, and ended after 9 months with over $300 million. We generated in excess of $190 million in operating cash flow, but we used that cash flow to pay down debt. $170 million, in debt payments, $47 million in our inaugural dividend payment and sustaining CapEx of 45. Even with the debt repayments, dividend repayments, and sustaining CapEx, we're still generated significant free cash flow through the first 9 months and continue to in the near future. Our free cash flow yield puts us is well above our peers. These figures show that the precious metal space, the average overall, is just over 2%, where ours is closer to 12%. This shows that Fruita del Norte is a unique asset, and the opportunities that Lundin Gold has to continue to focus on shareholder growth, shareholder value, internal growth, and cleaning up the balance sheet. Those are the areas that we're really focusing on, given the significant free cash flow that we've generated. I mentioned we paid our first dividend earlier this year on September 13th at 20 cents a share. We started out with semi-annual dividends. So annually, we're committed to paying 40 cents a share under our dividend policy, which was implemented earlier this year. In terms of dividend yield, that too, much like our free cash flow yield, puts us in a very unique position in terms of the precious metal space overall, with yield in excess of 4%, whereas in the precious metal space overall, it's under 2%. We have stated that we're going to move to quarterly dividends in 2023, starting with our first payment in March of 10 cents per share. Our current cash, as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the 9 months, was over $300 million. Our long-term debt, which is comprised of three components, is just under $590 million, which on a debt-to-equity ratio is low. That said, we want to focus on cleaning up the balance sheet. Our debt is comprised of three components. Our gold prepay, which that value there will fluctuate quarter on quarter because it is a gold instrument and therefore has to be updated mark to market each quarter. But at the end of Q3 was $148 million. What we are looking at is opportunities to potentially repay that facility in 2023. The stream, the second component, at $225 million, is something that's a little bit more structured. But we do have the opportunity in June 2024 to buy back 50% of that for $150 million. This makes a lot of sense at prices even substantially lower than what we see today. So this is something the company definitely will be looking at doing. And last but not least is our senior debt facility. This is more conventional debt. At the end of Q3, that value was $192 million. And we are looking at either repaying that debt in 2023 or looking at restructuring it into an operating line of credit. Now let's talk about growth. We are looking at M&A opportunities, but it's difficult to find something that's accretive given how good Fruita del Norte is. So for us, we're focusing on exploration. We have a significant land package that we acquired when we acquired this asset in 2014. And we have three levels of exploration. Conversion drilling, which is really focusing on Fruita del Norte that we know today, converting inferred resources to indicating, so which we then can bring into our mine plan, which helps to increase our reserves. Our near mine program is looking at opportunities within a kilometer of Fruita del Norte. So these are things that if we do discover something could be currently mined and milled with our existing infrastructure. And then our regional program is looking at opportunities that are 7 to 10 kilometers away. Still could be used our existing infrastructure, but would require new permitting, etc., so a little longer term. On the conversion, we announced some results recently, some significant results, and we're now working on updating our resource and reserve estimate, which will be issued in Q1 of next year. You can see on this graphic the gray shaded area, which is our existing mine plan and even some of the existing mined out areas. And what we're looking is trying to expand significantly to the south. On the near mine, this is a new program that was started drilling in Q3 and looking at drilling from both underground and on surface. So the targets to the right and left of Fruita del Norte shown here in this graphic are drilled from underground, and the targets to the south or below Fruita del Norte are drilled from surface. In addition to the targets to the east and west, we're also looking at depth. Some of our conversion drilling, we kept the drill holes going beyond the outside current resource envelope that we call it. And we had, as you can see here, hit some significant intercepts. Previously, Fruita del Norte was thought to be cut off at depth, but what we're seeing now are opportunities to drill even deeper and expand Fruita del Norte at depth. This, again, would be relatively easy to do by just extending our infrastructure within the mine and going a bit deeper. So these are really near-term, really close targets that could significantly improve the reserves at Fruita del Norte in the very short term. On the east and west side, you can see on these graphics, there are opportunities. Fruita del Norte was defined by these two, or really restricted by two faults, an east and a west fault. And it was thought that there was, on the west side, they thought there may be opportunities, but people had discounted the east side. We've re-looked at historic drill holes, and as a result, have been able to identify some areas of hydrothermal alteration, which is what was the start of Fruita del Norte. And so we're drilling from underground now, which is much more efficient and allows us to test many more targets quickly and cheaply. So we're drilling there from underground in our existing workings, now both on the east and the west side. Now in the regional program, again, these are targets 7 to 10 kilometers away from Fruita del Norte, but in a very prospective environment. We now have been drilling these areas for 2 years. This will be our second full year when by the end of this year. And I've tested many targets, seen hydrothermal alteration, but not seen a significant gold mineralization yet. That doesn't mean that these programs we're not very excited about these programs. We continue to see what we call smoke, or the geologists are very interested. We're seeing the indicators of epithermal systems in the area, strong indicators. And as a result, we continue to keep wanting to drill here. So we've had 3 rigs turning here on this program. We've been so excited with our near mine programs, we've actually moved one of the rigs up to that program now, but this program will continue. Our exploration has been, in our mind, very successful with conversion drilling, which will enable us to expand our resource and reserve statement in Q1 of next year. Our near mine program, which was originally to drill about 4,000 meters this year. We have ended up drilling about 6,000, but we're more than doubling that program for 2023. And then our regional program, we're pulling back a little bit, but not stopping. We just feel that there's more opportunities, what we're seeing based on the drilling to date with the near mine program. But again, investing in growth. The key to exploration is to have a pipeline of targets starting from which are targets that are based on geological mapping or very high level geology. And you continue to keep working on those through field sampling, geophysics, and drilling to bring them up to the top of the pyramid here to where they're turning into resources and reserves. Like many things, it takes a lot of targets in order to get to the top of that pyramid. But you can see here, we've got quite a pipeline that we're working on. I mentioned earlier that nothing can be done without a strong ESG platform. We have a 5-year sustainability strategy, which we started in 2021 when we moved into operations. And that sustainability strategy is based on these 8 pillars. We have KPIs in every one of these, and you can see some figures here where we've had significant impact, both locally and nationally. Our workforce, which is about 1,700 to 1,800 employees, over 50% of that is from people that live within the province. Over 90% of our workforce is Ecuadorian. We're generating significant economic benefits for local economy in terms of small businesses, and our employees living in those economies with their wages are spending money, and we see all the communities improving. And the quality of life overall is improving significantly in and around Fruita del Norte. I mentioned earlier that we are connected to the grid. So we're not generating power from diesel generators or other generating types. We are generating power from the national grid, which is 85% hydro. As a result, and the fact that we're an underground mine, puts us as one of the lowest greenhouse gas emitters amongst the gold mining industry in the world today at 0.12 tons CO2 per ounce of gold produced. That said, much like with our operating costs and production, operational excellence driven, we are looking at trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to make us the lowest greenhouse gas emitter in the gold space today. I mentioned the economic benefits. When Lucas Lundin and myself went down to Ecuador in 2014 and met with the government, Lucas stated that we will take a resource which is essentially worth zero in the ground and create economic wealth, generate wealth for the country, both locally and nationally. Mining exports, there was a second mine. This isn't just Fruita Del Norte. There was a second mine that started up roughly at the same time, a copper operation. And mineral exports now in a country that is a US dollar economy is really critical, reliant on exports. Mining has now jumped from being in the top 10 to number 4. You can see here the economic benefits that Fruita Del Norte, just Fruita Del Norte alone, will generate for the country, between 1.3 and 1.5 billion over life of mine, based on taxes and royalties paid. Our domestic purchases just in 4 years were 815 million, and exports in excess of $8 billion. In terms of local economies, significant improvement. Yansatsa, which is the county in which the operation is located in, has been noted as one of the most dynamic economies in terms of growth and expansion over the last 3 years in the country of Ecuador. In closing, we're focused on 4 pillars, or foundation and 3 pillars. ESG is so critical to the success of our business. Operational excellence, continuing to look at reducing our costs, increasing our production, which enables us to generate significant cash flow, begin returning capital to shareholders, cleaning up our balance sheet, and investing in growth. Some near-term catalysts for our shareholders: the regional and near mine exploration drilling results, which will be issued as assays come in, our updated resource estimate in Q1, our first quarterly dividend payment. So we paid semi-annual and 20 cents per share, but our first 10 cents per share in Q1 of next year, and our greenhouse gas emission targets. Again, thank you very much for taking the time to hear a little bit more about Lundin Gold, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any. We have a question from an investor. What are the drivers behind your below average all-in sustaining costs versus peers, and is it sustainable? That's a great question. The answer is primarily we're US dollar in Ecuador, so we don't see the currency inflation that many other jurisdictions are seeing. The other is wage inflation. Many jurisdictions are seeing significant inflation in their wages. We are not seeing that in Ecuador because mining is a new industry for Ecuador, and it's one that many people would like to work in because they see long-term stability in that industry. So we're not seeing the wage inflation. And then the last component is energy, which I mentioned. Because we're on the grid and it's primarily hydro, we're not seeing the big fluctuations like many jurisdictions are seeing, which are their energy may be driven more by coal or gas. And so as a result, based on those 3 factors, it is sustainable. Another question, will you be buying more concessions by acquiring neighbor junior miners, like, for example, Oriana Resources? We've got a significant exploration package with the land package that we have. We will look at opportunities within Ecuador and in other jurisdictions for early stage acquisitions. But at this point in time, over the next couple, 3 years, we're really going to focus on exploration of our existing concessions, just because, as always in the mining industry, the best place to look for another deposit is in the shadow of an existing mine. Another question, what is your projected dividend payout ratio for 2023? And is a priority of cash flow your debt repayment? Our dividend payments for 2023 will be a total annual of 40 cents per share, so 10 cents per quarter, for 2023, and we've committed to an annual dividend of 100 million total, which is equivalent roughly to that 40 cents per share. So it will continue. So our yield will obviously, or payout ratio or yield will vary with stock price, but we're committed to that 10 cents per share. And with the other cash flow expiration, definitely if we tag something, we'll increase cash flow there, but debt repayment is a high priority as well to clean up our balance sheet. Another question, any geopolitical risk operating in Ecuador, and what level of support does the government provide to the mining industry? Ecuador, it is a challenge because mining is a new industry in the country, but we have agreements in place with the government that are long-term agreements which establish our fiscal and operating regime. And so things actually with us and Mirador have gone quite well with the government. And we've also shown that we are doing what we said we'd do, which is generating significant development opportunities both locally and at the national level. That said, if you have a development project in Ecuador today, things just haven't been moving as quickly as many would like to see. That's not unheard of in terms of many other jurisdictions. That said, I think in some respects, Ecuador is a shining light for the mining industry across South America when you look at things that are happening in Peru, Chile, etc. Also, the geological potential in Ecuador is significant. Some of the world's largest mines in Peru, Chile, and Colombia are situated in the same geological belts and conditions as Ecuador. There just hasn't been a lot of exploration in Ecuador because the majority of that same geology is covered by rainforest. And as a result, it's harder to identify. But now, with Fruita del Norte and others, those opportunities are there. As you see no other questions, again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to hear a little bit more about Lundin Gold. I do encourage you to take a chance, if you can, to look at our sustainability report and our inaugural climate change report, which are available on our website. Once again, we trade on the OTCQX under the symbol LUGDF. And thank you again.